Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I want to make sure you're in the right session today. This session is Boost Your Career and Add Value to Your Company with Custom Apps. Today, the presenters will be myself, Sarah Franklin. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager with Force.com, or with Salesforce, and Hank Thompson with Granicus. Before we get started, quick safe harbor. As you know, Salesforce is a public traded company. Don't make investment decisions based on our presentation. If you have questions, go to salesforce.com/investor. So the subject matter today is really to talk to people like yourself, admins who are building, maybe customizing your CRM and are maybe looking to really boost your career with the skill sets that you've acquired by adding value to your company by building these custom applications. And we've got tons of admins today. Hank's one of them. We've got a lot of them out there that are solving real business problems and evolving their careers, becoming go-to people, and making a direct impact on their company. So their company is more successful, they've got great job security, and they're moving up the ranks. And so our goal today is to help you understand maybe what that recipe for success is and talk to somebody directly and learn how he was able to evolve his career and become really a hero to his company. The agenda we've got lined out for you today is I'll do one-click slide. I promise no death by PowerPoint on reviewing the platform, but I'll review the platform real quickly. And then I'll introduce Hank, and he's got a lot of great stories about the business problems that his company faced. And he'll talk straight to you about how his career's evolved, the solutions he's created, and he'll share for you. I told him I think he should write a book. I'm serious about that, about his recipe for success. And then we will have an open question and answer session with the mics in the middle, so that'll be available at the end. So Force.com, you heard Mark talk about this today. This chiclet slide doesn't incorporate the new chatter, but Force.com is the platform that you have already that runs your CRM. So if you're a SFA user, a Service Center user, you already have the platform, and you can expand that platform to more areas of your company and expose them to applications just like Vitrazo showed you, with lots of other applications beyond sales and call center that can really add value, make your company operate just as efficiently as Vitrazo did, for example. So without further ado, we want to bring up Hank. And Hank, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Talk to us a little bit about your company and what you're doing.
Sure.
Are you on?
No. Sure. All right. So, hello. My name's Hank Thompson. I'm the Sales and Marketing Operations Manager for Granicus. That means that I basically build and administrate business processes for our sales and marketing teams.
So can you tell us a little bit, I don't know if everybody knows what Granicus is. It's actually a very interesting company, and it does a lot of good stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about Granicus?
Absolutely. Granicus is a government transparency provider, which means that we work with our clients. We work for government. We have about 600 clients, everybody from city councils to school districts, all the way up to like state legislatures. And we work with our clients to help them use the web to connect more effectively with their citizens. So that involves, taking their meetings and putting them on the internet, and then making it easier for sort of citizens to access all the information that the government's producing.
So when the government's doing all this stuff in their meeting rooms and they're having their debates and discussions, I can actually watch that online.
Right. It's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Want to know what the politicians are up to. So help us understand. So Granicus is actually a company that you run your entire business, like Vitrazo was talking about today. You've mentioned apps to me about your HR, project management, knowledge. Can you tell us a little bit about all the applications that you guys use at Granicus?
Sure. Yeah, one of the things about Granicus has been a long-time Salesforce user. And one of the things that I only discovered that was unique about us when I started talking to other Salesforce users was that we have one user license for every employee. So literally every person, when you come in the door, you get a Salesforce license. So what that's allowed us to do is not just to sort of take the typical CRM processes, like when the opportunity goes from through the marketing funnel, through the sales pipeline, through new client deployment, past finance, and into support, not only has it allowed us to sort of extend those typical CRM processes, but it's allowed us to sort of depend on Force.com for all sorts of other non-typical processes. So one of the examples you were talking about is human resources. So we use it for our entire recruiting. We have like a position record and then a series of candidate records that roll up to that, and we use those two records to manage every hire that we do at the company. Another good example is the project record. We use a really simple project record that we put together, but almost every department throughout the company uses it to manage their projects. And the cool thing is that they're all able to sort of add their own fields and customize their own page layouts. But when you look at it company-wide, you can, there are some underlying fields which are the same amongst them all. So, depending so heavily on Force.com, it's really seeped into every nook and cranny of our business, has helped us.
So Granicus benefits, right, from our platform, which we're really happy about. Your sales guy's really probably happy that everybody has a login. but what about you? Tell us a little bit about how long you've been at Granicus. When you came into Granicus, what skills did you have? Had you used Salesforce before? What was your technical background? And where are you now? We want to know about you. We want to know about Hank.
Fair enough. Well, when I came to Granicus, I had a number of skills that have kind of helped me accomplish what I've been able to accomplish with Force.com. Not the least of which was Jedi-like Excel skills. It's extremely good with Excel. And I think that's actually like a really good place to start. If you can wrap your head around a spreadsheet, you really kind of have, mentally have everything you need to understand the basics of, object building and sort of field design and stuff like that. I also had some basic web design skills. Nothing too crazy, but I could put together a web page. So HTML, a little bit of CSS. I kind of knew my way around JavaScript, but I've learned a lot more about that now. I did come in with programming, with some programming knowledge. So in a couple different languages, I was fairly good with Java, which set me up really well to learn Apex. And then I had a small amount of database experience. So a little bit of SQL and Crystal reports. Once again, nothing too crazy. There'd be some, crazy joins and stuff that would happen in SQL, stuff that I didn't really understand. So what I've been able to do I've been at Granicus for about 2 years and a couple months now. And when I first came to Granicus, I had never used Salesforce before. So what I've been able to sort of gain primarily through using the online training resources, the free online training resources, and by getting involved with the developer community and the message boards, I've been able to really grow my skills at putting together stage-based sort of workflows, taking business processes and splitting them down into linear stage-based workflows that can be implemented in Salesforce. I've gotten good at building objects, understanding the way you relate those objects to each other. I've also learned a lot about Apex and Visualforce, although there's still a lot more to learn.
So it sounds like you weren't a certified professional programmer, but you did have some technical expertise. You knew how to program a little bit. So let me ask this. I know some people might be asking, how many of you guys still maybe, though, don't feel you fit in that category? Any of you feel like you still can't code or anything? Yeah, so a lot of you. So don't want you to be scared. Hank's going to go through some of that in a little bit. Just want to be upfront. He did have some of that knowledge, but we'll talk about how you can acquire the knowledge that you really need to build apps. So that gives us a little bit about yourself. So let's get into the secret recipe, right? So you've been able to really go from having no Salesforce experience to managing people that have all this across business process, across different departments of the business. What's your recipe for doing that?
Well, this is sort of the high-level overview. We're going to go into each one of these in more depth. But from a high level, going from maybe having just added some custom fields, maybe put together some formulas, to really understanding how to build out possibly really complex business processes in Salesforce is easier than I think a lot of people assume that it is. So I got 6 steps here. Just run through them real quick. The first and foremost is to find a business problem to sort of practice on, or to start with. A lot of people will kind of do it the other way. They'll say, oh, there's this really cool tool that just came out in Salesforce, or there's this really nifty feature. How can I, what can I do with that in my business? And I think that's sort of putting the cart before the horse. The first thing is to always start with the business. Start with the business process that is problematic or inefficient, and only then should you move on and say, well, how can I possibly use Salesforce to solve that? Second is to know the basics. We'll kind of dig into that a little bit more. Third is to break down the problem into sort of what Salesforce can help with and what is more business process sort of stuff. Design the solution out before you start building. Then build it, and then don't forget to put a lot of attention, a lot of effort into the rollout.
So let's dive in. Let's understand each of these steps. And again, I'm serious. You should write a book. So when you talk about finding a business problem, you said, oh, there's this new feature people are talking about. That's not the way that they should go. How do you actually find a business problem that's suitable for Force.com?
Right. Well, there's a few things to kind of keep an eye out for. I'm gonna dig into one of the first problems I was able to tackle. But from a high level, if you're looking for something to solve, one of the keys is anything that's involving spreadsheets. So you already have Salesforce. So obviously there's stuff to use it for. But anything that any part of the business you find where there's like people emailing spreadsheets over here, or there's sort of collaboration, or there's different versions of information that are sort of getting lost. Those are like big red flags for really good problems to tackle, because Salesforce is really good at sort of collaboration and at sort of centralizing the storage of this stuff.
So how many of you guys have like a perfectly run business? You have no problems. Wow, you're doing something right. So that means that you guys all have opportunities to really go in, and Hank's going to go through this today. That's an opportunity for you to start looking at these problems and finding solutions. So you talked about this first example, this account regionalization. I imagine actually a lot of people might have this similar problem.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a common issue, and you guys have Salesforce has a solution for it, but it's kind of simplistic for some uses.
Are you saying Salesforce isn't perfect? We don't.
Not yet. You're working on it. Let me briefly explain to you kind of that this is kind of one of the first problems that I was able to tackle when I came to Granicus, and it was actually the problem that caused me to learn Apex. Because, like I said, I didn't know any Apex. I really had no experience with Salesforce, and so this is one of the first things that I got to dig into. So we had this process that we called the integrated campaign. So field sales would target a particular region for a field visit 3 weeks out. Marketing would blast the area with emails, all the contacts in that area, and then inside reps would follow up, especially with the people who had hand raises, to schedule appointments. So it was a pretty good plan, and it worked. The process itself worked for us, but there were a lot of problems. For one, we had a lot of problems with reporting. We would try to run a report on, say, give me all of the qualified accounts in this area or this region, but this area would be something like the Greater Boston area, or Southern Oregon, east of Portland, which isn't exactly something that you can report on in Salesforce. So we needed some way to group accounts together and then report on them effectively. Salesforce has territory management, but the problem we ran into with territory management is that you can have accounts come in, and based on fields that are already on the record, you can group them into territories. But that leaves you to things like state, which was too big for us because you can't drive around a state in a reasonable amount of time. Zip code, it was too small, right? Because there's so many zip codes, and it would have just been a hassle trying to manage it every time we wanted to change regions around. And then city, which wouldn't really work for rural areas. So basically, the system was broken. We knew we needed we needed something else. So the solution we ended up figuring out was creating a new object called the G region. And the idea is that the G region would, with the support of with a couple of supporting objects that I'm going to show you in a second, would help us automatically assign accounts to these regions based on zip code. So, do I click on something?
I think if you click on it, it'll bring it up.
Okay. So bear with me for a second. I didn't log in yet.
So you're going to show us live, assuming the IP restriction works?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Good. Live demos. Gotta love them.
All right. So what you can see here is a kind of a sample account that we have. So as you can see, there's two fields here called G region and G county. And they're both blank right now. That's because these are set automatically based on the zip code, and there's no zip code for this account right now. Now, the cool thing about the solution that we were able to come up with is that it's really simple. It's a simple idea, but and it didn't take that long to develop, but it had a tremendous effect on our business. So if I just go in here and put in a Kansas City zip code, 64110, and save the record, you'll see that the G region and the G county fields are automatically populated by this sort of trigger that we created. So the idea is, if I just open up one of the G county records, that it will find in the background what's happening is that there's a zip code record for that 64110 zip code. And so you hit the save button. I wrote an Apex trigger that goes and searches and finds the appropriate zip code record. As you see, there's not much information on here, just some basic metadata. But this zip code is linked to the county that it belongs in. Now, the key to this, and I'm going to kind of go through some more steps that we went through to build and develop this project in the next slides. But the key to this is we started with a piece of information that we could readily purchase. We were able to purchase a database of every zip code, right, in the country from, I think it was zipcodes.com, which I'm sure some of you have dealt with before, right? Every zip code in the country in one big CSV file with the primary county that it belonged to. So it took us no effort. And it was very, very cheap and very effective for us to use the data loader to sort of load those all in sort of one fell swoop. And then based on that, we were now able to, with the concept of the county, counties are easy to map, counties easy to present, we were able to very effectively reach out to the sales reps and reach out to the sales managers and get them to group these counties sort of into regions. See, the counties were still too small because there would be maybe 40 or 50 of them in some states. So we needed another layer of abstraction on top of that. So if I go up to the G county record, you see, once again, this is pretty simple, like nothing too complicated. The main point is that each G region, or each G county, belongs to one specific G region. So if we go up here, we see U.S. Missouri Region 1. And the key part of this is that now we've effectively linked every zip code in the country up to a county, grouped the counties into regions, and then assigned each region a nice short code. You see this one is MO01, right? And so when we go back to the account record, we now have that nice, easy-to-type code on the account record, and therefore accessible to all of the contacts. So now we can very easily run a report for all contacts that says, give me all of the contacts for qualified accounts in Missouri's Region 1 and 2 and Kansas Region 4, right? And that's something that is really quick and really easy. So what were the results of that? Well, to kind of explain a little bit more about the process that we came from, they had a process for doing this when I came. And what it was basically they would take they would say, oh, we want to focus on the Kansas City area. They would get the zip code for the center of that. They put it into a zip code radius tool. They would run like a 5-mile radius. It would return all of the zip codes in like that 5-mile radius in like a CSV file. And they would copy and paste those over into the filter criteria of reports. And then, sometimes they wouldn't all fit, so you'd have to run multiple reports, export the reports, merge it into like this monster Excel document, and it was a nightmare. It was a hassle. It was the complete opposite of an efficient process, right?
So you found a business problem that was very tangible. You didn't say, oh, there's a new feature in territory management. What you did is you said, there's a problem with what we're doing, and you tackled that. You increased the accuracy of your reporting. The campaign time went down from multiple hours to less than an hour. And how do people look at you then? This was your first project, you said, when you came to Granicus. How do people look at you then?
Yeah,
after about 2 weeks, you said this took?
This was my first big sort of development project that I dug into. I got it about 2 months in after I'd kind of tried some smaller things with Salesforce. It was cool. After I got this done, there was sort of this large intractable problem that everybody had just hit a wall with, and because I wasn't like afraid to sort of dig in and learn some new skills, I was able to build around it. And not only was I given more complex problems and more fun stuff to work on, after that, I was also, that foundation, because we started with something simple, tangible, and doable, we were able to continue building on it. We've continued to build on the G region, and now it's this whole thing that connects to a series of other records.
Well, that's great. So now, getting back to, half the people in the room raise their hands. They might not know how to do triggers and Apex. They might not know how to do Apex. What are the basics that they need to know, and how do they go about getting those skills to actually, build apps like this?
The cool thing is you have lots and lots of resources available to you, and most of them don't cost any money. Well, in addition to, once you're a Salesforce customer, and just having basic access to the internet. So the first step, if you want to kind of pick up some of these skills, is to really understand Salesforce. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I know Salesforce. But if there's any of those little features where you're like, what is that? Or like, how does that, how does that work? You need to like dig in and sort of just go through some of the online trainings. So there are these online trainings that are free. You go up to the help and training link, and then there's a training tab. And I was lucky because when I first got to Granicus, my second weekend, my boss sat me down in front of the online training, and he was like, "Your next week, just do this, learn this." And I sat down and I did every single one of the online trainings that pertained to one of both of the roles that I was kind of filling, and it was kind of dry,
a little boring maybe,
a little boring at times, like fending off sleep a couple times there, but I toughed it through, and it really helps. There are these sort of flash-based trainings and stuff like that, so those really helped. But if you're like, I don't have time to do, learn every nook and cranny, the area to focus on is reporting. Everything begins and ends with reports. Reporting is the reason that people bother to put data into Salesforce in the first place. So if you're going to focus on one area, I would say focus on learning how to understand every nook and cranny of the reporting system and how to build custom report types. Know that forwards and backwards before you get started with anything. At least half of the requests that I get from people asking me to build something
can be solved with a report?
Yeah.
Wow.
Either with a custom report type or sometimes just with a basic report. And the whole reason that they come to me for help is because they don't understand reports properly.
So then there's a bunch of other online resources you're saying for getting these other skills, like
right.
HTML.
So, the other thing is to understand that if you want to get into Apex or Visualforce, you need to kind of know some basics first. If you want to get into Visualforce, you're going to need to know some basic HTML first. You don't have to be like a professional web designer, but you need to know like the basics. If you want to get really jiggy with your Visualforce,
get jiggy with it.
If you want to change colors and styles and really like add some pop, then you're also going to need to know CSS. The cool thing is there are free online resources. List one there called W3 Schools. It's a free online resource that has really effective and really sort of trusted tutorials that you can go on, and they'll step you through it every step of the way. How to learn HTML, how to learn CSS, how to learn JavaScript.
So what I'm hearing from you is that there's maybe, if you could invest some time, maybe pop some caffeine to keep your eyes open and power through it. You can get these skills without having to go through classes, and training's not going to like me saying that because they wanted you to pay that. But there's a lot of resources for you to acquire those skills, right. and you really get those basics down. So then assuming that you found a business problem, you've learned these basics, okay? Now what is the next step for everybody here?
Well, it's really easy, once you're like, oh, I figured out how to, do some basic Apex. I figured out how to do workflow. I just jump in and start building something right away. But the first step really is to break down the problem. You want to separate the business problems, or the sort of business process problems, from the systems problems. And that's really important, to kind of give an example.
Yes.
When they came to me with this account regionalization, with this G-region project, they didn't say we need to create G-regions based on counties. They came to me and they said, we're running this zip code, radius system, and it takes us like 4 or 5 hours to run this process every time we do a campaign. So if I would have jumped in right away, the easy thing to do would have been to build them, and that's what they asked for. They wanted a more effective radius search tool, right? But you have to kind of take a step back sometimes and see the bigger picture and see, well, okay, why do they want a more effective radius search tool? It's like, oh, because the real problem is that we're having difficulties communicating from sales to marketing the areas that they want to focus on, and sort of when they want to focus on them. So I mean, that's the first step. And then the second step, I think, is to not be too ambitious. So
don't try to boil the ocean.
Right. There's another tendency when you're first jumping in. You found your problem, and it's probably a big problem. It's probably a really important problem, and it might be kind of huge. And so you might be tended to just bite off the whole thing and solve the whole problem, and say, okay, well, how can I fix this problem completely? Well, and that's a good thing to think about. But if it's a really big problem, you should break it into phases. One of the, to provide another example, the account regionalization process, we figured out after digging in a little bit more that the real problem, it was really sort of two problems. There was this idea that we weren't able to run reports effectively on which accounts were in a certain area. But then there was also this process where at the beginning of every quarter, the sales reps would email a spreadsheet with a list of all the areas they were going to focus on. And so that was kind of inefficient. And the first part of the project didn't really tackle that problem. But I realized, getting into it, that solving the communication issue that part wasn't going to be successful unless we had an effective regionalization system first. So if you have a really big thing, split it into sort of tackleable goals, and then try to get stuff released as quickly as possible. One of the biggest advantages of Salesforce is that you can make these sort of short releases. And the old model, the software model, is to sort of build everything up and then do a big point release, 1.0, 2.0, right? But the cool thing about Salesforce is that you can release something that's small, somewhat useful but not earth-shattering, and then get feedback on it. So if I could, encourage you to do one thing, anybody to do one thing, it'd be to make something as small as possible, get it out to your users, and start getting their feedback. The most 1 week of live user feedback is way more useful than an entire year of careful planning.
So once you've got your problem and you've broken it down, what would be the next thing that you want to do?
Dive in and start designing it. You're not really ready to build yet still, and I think that's the key. Is now you're like, okay, well, I understand my problem. I know what it is. I have the skills to do it. I'm just going to dive in and start building something in Salesforce because it's easy to do. And I've done that before, and then I've done the design first and then implement later. And I've done each a number of times, and always the most effective is to have a really complete design before you start building.
So when you're creating a design, is that, are you creating entity relationship diagrams, like building up Visio and putting a lot of effort into the documentation there for your design? What are you doing there?
You could. I don't. I like to start with Excel, or with a spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet, I guess. I like to start with a spreadsheet, sometimes maybe like a Word doc, just like a bulleted list. Nothing too complex. The idea is you just need to list out all of the objects that you're going to need. You got to answer some questions. Are you going to be adding fields to an existing object? Are you going to be creating a new object altogether? What are the sort of metadata fields that you need on each object? And then you got to think about how are those objects related together. So one of the things to think about is one-to-many versus many-to-many. So the concept is we had our regions, right? And then G region, each G region had a number of G counties. But each G county could only belong to one region. So that's a standard pick list, right? A pick list on the G county that points up to the G region. So that's a one-to-many relationship. If the business process would have been such that we needed the G county, to belong to multiple regions, then we would have needed to have a many-to-many relationship. So it's really important to think, what are my objects, and how are they related, and does each one need to belong to only one, or does it need to belong to many? If it needs to belong to many, if you end up with a many-to-many relationship, then you have to actually create an extra object, like a connector record, that's just a basic sort of dummy record with a pick list that points to each object. So, and there's some very real consequences to that, because it's a lot harder to report on this.
So it sounds to me like you said, go get books, get old school. Similar approach. You want to sit down maybe even with a piece of paper and pen and write it out, draw it out, and just think it through so that, but then what happens if, you forget something along the way? It's like, oops, forgot that. Right.
So the further you get along in this process of app building, the more work it takes to fix any problems in your logic early on. Mm-hmm. One of the sort of logic tests that you can do here is around reporting. Kind of like I was saying before, I think that everything sort of starts and ends with reporting. That's why we put so much effort in putting all this data into Salesforce, populating out the opportunity records, logging calls. The only reason anybody does it is so that somebody at the end of the day can run a report. So your first question after you've sort of had this rough architecture together should be, what type of reports am I going to need to run? And reach out to your stakeholders in this process and ask them what they need to see. Like, if you need to be able to visualize it, draw out each thing that needs to be on the report, how it needs to be broken down, and where the fields are. And then you look and say, well, can that report actually be made? Mm-hmm. There are some limitations to Salesforce reports.
What?
So it's
no.
So it's important, going back to the sort of know your basics to understand Salesforce reporting forwards and backwards.
The world starts and ends with reports.
Absolutely.
It's like Vitrazo said today that if you, what did he say? That he likes dashboards because if you can report on it, then you can improve it. Did you guys catch that in the keynote? I like that, yeah. So you seem to be in agreement with him.
Totally. Reports are the most important thing. And so then you'll inevitably find some holes in your logic, and you'll have to go back and change some things in your spreadsheet plan or your pen and paper plan. And you'll go back and forth, but if you have a complex problem, especially if there's many-to-many relationships, sometimes you'll hit a wall where you can't solve this problem with the standard reports, and so with a standard sort of report. So when you hit that wall, you basically have three tools to build around it. You have workflow with field updates, you have Apex, and you have Visualforce. So the idea is fix it as good as you can with your design. If you really hit something, then build around it. And then the end goal, what you should have when you're done with this design, is to have a complete list of every object, every field, every relationship, every workflow or Apex trigger or Visualforce page that needs to be built, all done, all completely scoped out before you've started building anything.
So we talked about this analogy earlier. It's kind of like, Thanksgiving's coming up and you want to write everything down before you go to the grocery store, right? Otherwise you're going to be baking the cookies and crap, I don't have any more eggs.
Right.
So you want to make sure you have all of your ingredients ready before you start actually building your application.
Pan you're going to cook it on.
Yeah.
Plate you're going to use to give it to the guests. Totally.
So then what's next?
Building. That's it. So the cool part is that if you've done your job getting up to this step, then it should actually be one of the easier steps. The hardest part, inevitably, the more practiced I've gotten at this and the more work I put into that scoping, that last step, the really scoping it out extremely well, the less time I spend actually building. I'll spend sometimes days, full days, like scoping and putting together my spreadsheet or my Word doc. But then because I've done that so well, when I actually go in and I go to start building everything, it's really fast. So, I put together this order, and this is the order that I do it in, but if I were going to recommend one thing, it would be to kind of keep out of this, it would be to start with objects and fields and to end with any Apex or Visual Force. The reasons for that are many. If you're doing Apex, you're going to have to create like a sandbox, and there's just a lot of sort of complications when you've already started writing code or you've already started coding like a Visual Force page, and then you have to go back and change the underlying structure. So I always start with objects and fields, build them all out, build some reports, some of the reports that you said you figured out that you needed, build some of those and sort of run them with some test records that you've created to like kind of dummy check your logic one more time and be like, can I actually report on this? Like if I like do what my trigger is supposed to do, or like do what all this, if I act it out with test records manually, can I actually run the report that I've been asked for? And there will be every once in a while where you'll run into something and you're like, oh, I can't run this, and you'll have to go back to the last step. Then write your workflow triggers, the non-Apex ones, right? And your validation rules especially, those will kind of mess up your Apex. And then when you're done with all of that, then dig into the Apex, and then that's it.
So and when you're building these apps, you might be able to do even, say, 3/4 of this, and you could maybe get help even for writing the Apex or Visual Force if you do need that, aspect.
There's tons of resources. Salesforce has resources. There's whole communities of developers waiting.
Yeah, I'll make consulting happen, not training. Yeah. Sell services for that part.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this is something that I know that you believe in really wholeheartedly about rolling out right. It deals a lot with communication, setting expectations. I know you think this is one of the most important steps.
Yeah, this is the key. If you it's easy to develop this thing and then just sort of turn it on and then, tell some people about it. If you flub the rollout, then all of the work that you put into designing, scoping, finding this problem is almost wasted. There's this problem, especially because a major part of, if you're having issues with Salesforce adoption, if you're trying to move to move like sort of Force.com into new areas of your business, one of the real things you have to worry about is perception. And if you mess up one rollout, and it's awkward and you haven't given people the things that they need, then it makes the next rollout that much harder. So and this is kind of also professionally where it starts to reflect back on you. You really have to follow through with the rollout and kind of keep your eye on the ball all the way through this step. So the 3 elements of a successful rollout are training, documentation, and reports. So training and documentation, they're kind of self-explanatory, but I'll run through them. The bigger the process, the sort of more headway you should give people on the training. For some of the larger processes that really affect multiple departments, especially if it affects money somehow, compensation or something like that, sometimes you want to hold 2 training sessions. You do one and then a follow-up one beforehand, and maybe even another one like after the rollout. So lots of training, clear documentation, role-based documentation. Make sure every person that's involved in this process has a clear, well-thought-out document. The end user, maybe the manager level, the administrator level, and then once again reports. If you don't, make sure everybody who is involved in this process, who you want to use this process, has the reports they need on day 1. I've had some experiences where I've kind of messed that up, and and where, you know, I've had a perfectly, like a really well thought out, well built system, but we forgot like this one report. And sure enough, because we didn't really do our diligence, like to reach out and make sure that we, you know, had heard that they needed that report, we got a week into it, and then, you know, I didn't hear anything about it until like a week after the rollout. And people are complaining, talking about how the system is awful and how they don't like it, and everybody's mad at me and mad at, like, you know. And
were they not talking to you?
all the talking they were doing was really mean. And so you get back into this process and you find out, oh, it's because they didn't have this report. And, you know, it's easy to assume that all of your users know how to build a report. I'm like, you can go create the report. Like, I'll do it in 30 seconds, right? But just, you know, having all those reports on day one is huge. It's really huge. So, you know, so those are kind of the big work elements of it. But the rest of it is really communication. So it's important to set expectations. If this is a phased rollout, then, you know, communicate really effectively that this is a phased rollout. This isn't supposed to solve the entire problem. Here are the next steps. Set really good expectations and always ask for feedback. So, you know, if you notice any problems, this will be going live on this and such date. If you notice any problems, I'll be available by phone, email, or chat, or however you guys do. And then just be extremely available for the first week. That's kind of a good...
Customer service oriented.
Right. You know, don't roll something out like 3 days before you're going to go on vacation. Make sure that you can actually be available. If you have a lot of meetings or something like that, make sure that you're going to be available, especially those first 2 days, but really for the whole first 5 business days, you should be uber available.
So that's really great advice. And people, so you've got 6 steps there to follow. It's kind of like a methodology even. Involves a lot of communication, a lot of upfront design skills. But then what does this do for you? I mean, you've talked about something like account regionalization. You've got lots of other examples that we haven't even touched on. But every time I've talked to you, I mean, people are happy that you're in the office. People are happy about what you're doing. So how does that affect your career, and how can building custom apps on the platform just evolve that for you?
Well, I mean, it's been really great for me. Sort of not just because you know, not just because I've been able to sort of you know, confront some problems and, like, you know, really have a lot of success in solving those problems, but because, you know, because I wasn't sort of afraid to dig in and really, like, pick up some new skills, I've been able to add a tremendous amount of value to my company. And so as a result of that, not only have I really, like, gained some more just experience with these sort of, because Salesforce is a really, like, you know, if people don't understand, is an amazingly cutting edge platform. Like, it's really great. And all of the technologies you're using on Salesforce, you know, Apex may be one language and it may be proprietary and unique, but the concepts that you learn by digging into Apex, or the concepts you learn by digging into Visualforce, or by really writing workflow and stuff like this, are concepts that are just basic cloud concepts. And getting familiar with that architecture is something that adds value, that I can already tell is, like, adding value to me, like, down the road, and, like, kind of keeping my knowledge and skills relevant. But, you know, more directly, you know, because I've had success with these things and really dug in, I've been able to get more and more. I basically get to work on all the, like, most interesting problems that we have in the company.
That's cool.
You know, it's way more fun.
If problems can be interesting, or they're headaches sometimes.
Right. I mean, you know, it's hard, but it's cool. So I get to work on all the fun stuff, and you know, it's you know, it's very satisfying. You know, my company runs faster. It runs more efficiently. And it runs smarter because of me and what I've been able to do with Force.com. And when I, you know, look back at it, it really wasn't that hard. I mean, it was, you know, it was some effort.
You had to learn.
Yeah. I mean, Salesforce didn't do it all for me, but, you know, almost.
Well, good. Well, so what we want you to do is feel empowered that you can, you know, follow this little simple methodology, get yourself the basic skills, just, you know, look for the business problems. Hank tackled a really straightforward problem with account regionalization. I don't know if any of you have territory management issues, but He also has done a lot of work with our HR, project management, a lot of examples. So if you can go find some business problems, take that back to your company, and just start advancing your career, for your selfish reasons, and also give back to your company by making them more efficient and making that a more stable workplace for you. Mark mentioned today in the keynote you can get started for free by going to free.force.com. And we're going to be covering more applications that other admins have built to give you more examples at 2:45 this afternoon. You guys all got that little card for the 100 free users. Additional resources are, all of the content from these sessions are available at developerforce/Dreamforce. There's a workbook to get started, a mention free edition, and we do want feedback on all of, on your feedback on all the sessions. So that being said, we've got the mics in the middle. If you guys have questions, you can just raise your hand or go to the mic. Yes, ma'am. You can, in the red, yeah, you can just say your question. Yeah, we'll repeat it.
So the question was, we have all this zip code data that we use for the G region system. How do we go about keeping it updated? Well, the cool thing was we got the zip code data from a vendor, and it was really cheap. I think it was like $200 for the whole database. And they actually have smaller updates that you can get for, it's a smaller amount of money, where they just show you all the ones, or they just give you all the ones that have changed. And so the way we loaded it in initially was the Apex data loader. And so the way we keep it up to date is also with Apex data loader. I had to kind of think about that on the front end to make sure that if the zip code changed, the trigger would go and propagate that to the accounts too. But I'm just with the data loader and by repurchasing sort of the refresher data. It's a manual process, but you only really have to do it once every year or two, and it takes probably about an hour, 2 hours. So,
are there other questions? Oh, yes, sir.
What was your favorite resource for learning some basic HTML code and how to write APX?
The question.
The question. Wait, he said it on the mic. The question was what, like a good resource about HTML?
Yeah.
Well, my favorite resource for HTML is w3schools.com, which is linked to in the presentation. If you go on there, they have some really good basic HTML tutorials. Now, it steps you through all the basics, and it really assumes you know nothing. And the cool thing about W3 Schools is, I think it's all ad supported or something, so you don't ever have to pay for anything. But the cool thing about it is they have this try it editor, and so you'll jump into these lessons, and then you can actually code your own and see an example of it. So it's really useful. But if you kind of hit specific things that you're looking for, another thing to do is really to just you're like, well, I'm trying to do this thing is to just search Google, HTML, add table border, right, something, and Google that, and that's kind of been my the resources that I've used. So.
Thanks.
Mine's a little off topic, but it's more for API developers and people using PHP and stuff like that. Are there any tracks or any orientation things going on where there's groups of API developers discussing, how to interact with the API outside of Apex and stuff of that here at Dreamforce?
Okay, so the question was, are there any good resources for API developers to sort of learn their skills? Yes, there are. There's actually a bunch of sort of developer groups and meetups. I think the first step is just getting to go to, I don't know if you have a developer.force.com
yes,
account.
I'm on it.
Yeah, is to kind of just dig into those. They have a lot of great resources on there that talk about sort of local meetups. I've been to some of the sort of, every once in a while they'll do the free sessions where they'll have sometimes they're down in Santa Clara. They have them all over the country, but I'm San Francisco based, so they'll have them either down in Santa Clara or in San Francisco.
I'm in the San Diego.
Yeah, totally. So they actually have a lot of like free developer sessions that are just focused on developers, where they come in and do kind of stuff like this, but very focused on that, and it doesn't really cost anything. And then there are other sort of more decentralized groups. So, but the key to all that is really just developer.force.com. It's all on there. You just have to search for it sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question was, you talked about laying out your code or your plan.
Right.
For the documentation of any custom objects or triggers and things like that, do you find that using Salesforce is a good enough reference, or do you have within your Excel spreadsheet, are you referencing those objects when you want to know what exactly this report is using or depending upon?
Right, right. Well, it depends. Salesforce is not a good. I mean, just what you've built in Salesforce is not good enough right now at self-documenting. So I always keep some extra documentation. It depends. It depends on how far I go with it. If it's a process that I'm going to be managing and I'm only going to be managing it for a while and it doesn't really touch a lot of other people, there's not a huge business need for me to put a lot of effort into administration or development documentation, then I'll basically just make sure that I keep my initial scoping document with all the relationships kind of scoped out, keep that and put it in Salesforce somewhere, and a lot of times I'll reference it in either in the code. And one of the cool things is if you load something in as like a Salesforce document or Salesforce content or something like that, you can take that URL and like throw it in, and like take the actual Salesforce URL and throw it in your comments, throw it in some of throw it in the administrator. What is the administrator info field on an object or on a field or something like that, and kind of link to the sort of larger documentation. But if it's a larger project, then I would say you should actually think out how people might want to change this, and then try and like make some prettier or clearer documentation around that. But I'll normally just do like a Word doc or something.
So my question is actually very much related to documentation as well. I was going to ask, do you document more from the user perspective and how they need to use the app that you've developed, or do you also develop documentation to show how you built it and the links? And I think that was kind of just answered in the last question.
Yeah, that's very similar. And like I said, it kind of depends on the size of the project. It really depends on how much time that I have and how many other people are going to be administrating it. If people are going to be administrating it, then I might actually have a development documentation and a basic administration documentation. But one of the other cool things you can do with end user documentation these days with Visualforce is I've started like making things completely self-documenting. So one of the nifty tricks is if you have like some sort of like a status field or something that's like a crazy complex formula, I'll create another formula that explains in English language why the other formula is equal to what it is. Like, oh, this account belongs to this person because there's an open opportunity with them. Or, oh, there's no open opportunity, therefore the owner of the G region is the thing. And so there are ways that you can use formula fields or where you can use Visualforce to sort of create really effective, like unified, like built-in documentation for the end user. So.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for staying, and thank you, Hank, for all of your wonderful knowledge today.
Thanks.
Have a good Dreamforce.